What is the Schomburg Center? To me, it is home. The place where we come to see who we really are, not just somebody else's reflection of who we are.
The Schomburg Center is a place of culture. It's a place of history. It's a place of knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is a repository of all of the things that has documented our sense of worth as a people.
For me, that means that it is a place of immense power.
The Schomburg Center is a public research library and a cultural institution
for the study of the Pan-African world.
It is perhaps the best in the world.
My Schomburg Center is Arturo Alfonso Schomburg.
Arturo Schomburg said, Black history and culture and intellect exists at a time when most people didn't believe that. He collected those evidences, and that became the beginning of the collection.
And it has expanded and has grown to where it is now a world-class institution.
It holds over 10 million items.
There's no parallel anywhere that brings to light what we as people of color have done, what we continue to do.
Black culture is all of culture. The universals that animate everyone's life happen here for all people.
The Schomburg, for me, is one of the center pillars of Harlem. When I started the journey of finding out about Red Rooster and Harlem, the very first place I went to was the Schomburg.
Researchers from around the world come and use what we have here.
I could not have written just about any of the books that I've written without the Schomburg Center's archives, resources.
The Schomburg Center is much more than a library. We encourage lifelong learning and exploration.
The Junior Scholars Program is a Saturday program with students from 5th grade to senior year in high school to help them learn about Black history and culture.
Learning about my history is important because it teaches me who I am.
The Schomburg Junior Scholars Program is going to do nothing but uplift them.
So many talented and brilliant people have walked the corridors of this amazing institution over the years. From Octavia Butler to Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, Ella Fitzgerald, Alvin Ailey, and Harry Belafonte, who graced the stage in this room of the American Negro Theater.
This place evokes great memories. It was a gift to us in our community to really try to find that space to reflect expressions of Black experience. I just knew that the environment, what I saw these young African Americans doing, was a place I needed to be.
What is my Schomburg Center? I'm standing here at the Cosmogram, which underneath holds the ashes of the poet Langston Hughes. On the evening when this Cosmogram was dedicated, people began to empty out of the auditorium. A jazz trio struck up, and to my amazement, Amira Baraka went over and asked Maya Angelou for a dance. And they started to dance on top of the Cosmogram, on top of the ashes of Langston Hughes, and I felt what a fitting way to kiss the memory of Langston.
The Schomburg Center is a research institute and a library, but it's so much more than that.
There's something going on every day.
So many amazing people come here to talk about their creative craft, to share what inspires them. The Schomburg Center's collections help to tell stories even beyond our walls.
The Schomburg Center is here in this exhibition at MoMA, One Way Ticket, Jacob Lawrence's Migration Series. We depend on the resources of the Schomburg to enable us to tell this story. Thinking about the implications of the past on the present is absolutely crucial for understanding the next steps, understanding what we have to do to go forward.
We today have the responsibility of making sure that new artists and activists, new scholars and poets know that this place continues to be a resource and a source of inspiration for the work that we must continue to do.
The Schomburg Center is knowledge.
The Schomburg Center, to me, is education.
The Schomburg Center is home, it is family, it is foundational.
The Schomburg Center is inspiration.
The Schomburg is with me in everything that I do.
Community, inside and out.
The Schomburg Center is us.
The Schomburg Center is you, and we invite each and every one of you to find your Schomburg Center.
Okay, so good morning, beautiful people. I am Shantae Burns-Simpson, the Associate Director for the Center for Educators in Schools, and on behalf of my colleagues, we welcome you to the spectacular Schomburg Center. The Schomburg is known for its one-of-a-kind collection and programming, and today will be no different. So look at your neighbor and say, "Are you ready?" And the virtual audience, please put in the chat, "I'm ready." So thank you, and please welcome to the stage the director of this amazing institution, Joy Bivens.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, you guys, thank you. Sometimes I come out here and I have to talk to them twice to get them to greet me. So I'm glad that you responded so enthusiastically. As Shantae said, my name is Joy Bivens. I have the distinct privilege of serving as director of this historic institution, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. We are on the precipice of our centennial. In 2025, we will celebrate 100 years of collecting, protecting, and documenting the global Black experience. So as you can imagine, the protection of teaching Black studies is paramount to us. It is part of our mission. It is what we take seriously because we are about the business of preserving the historic contributions that Black people have made, not just here in the United States, not just here in this hemisphere, but around the world. That is what Arturo Schomburg was doing when he was compiling this collection, really responding to this notion that Black people had no history. And what he was doing was using the material culture of our people to prove what we had done in this world. And in that time, since the beginning of his collection, and then in the last 100 years, we've amassed a collection of over 11 million items. And they are free for the public to use, really as a way to explore curiosity, to answer one's own questions about the past, and project what might be in the future. You are in for a treat this morning. I'm excited about the conversation that is about to take place. I want you to join with us in supporting the Schomburg Center as we continue the legacy and the tradition of our forebears of protecting our history. You cannot know the history of this nation without knowing the history of Black people. It is American history, it is world history, and we have to do everything we can to defend the right to teach it, the right to share it with our students so that they understand what their ancestors have given, what their ancestors have done, and in that same tradition, they can leave a legacy as well. I want you to join me in welcoming my colleague, Dr. Brian Jones, Director of the Center for Educators in Schools, to the stage as he introduces this wonderful program this morning and also will bring to you our distinguished guest, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. So thank you for being here, enjoy yourself, and if this is your first time to the Schomburg, welcome. If this is one of many times you've been to the Schomburg, welcome back. I encourage you to come for our programs and stay and learn. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, man. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes. Oh, this is such a beautiful room. It's so wonderful to be here with you, and thank you to those who are joining us as well online. As you just heard, my name is Brian Jones, Director of the Library's Center for Educators in Schools. As a former New York City public school teacher, and as a current New York City public school parent of two, I am just filled with so much joy that we get to spend this morning together. You're here, of course, because you understand the importance of Black studies and Black history. If you think about it, today is kind of like their worst nightmare, because it's like the librarians and the teachers are getting together in the library to talk about all the things. So glad that we're able to make that nightmare come true. A whole lot of people contributed to this day, and let me just run through some of them, because yes, you gracefully came in and you had a croissant and grabbed a book, and a lot of people thought a lot about making sure you had that lovely entrance to the space here today. So let me first thank all of the Schomburg staff: Joy Bivens, Novella Ford, Kevin Matthews, Barry Brown, Michael Bowman, Virginia Dixon, security and facilities, who made the space for us today. You know, there is a new edited anthology of crucial landmark texts in the domain of Black studies, and it is like teachable excerpts of those texts over many years. And listen to who co-edited this volume: Colin Kaepernick, how dare he? Robin D.G. Kelly and Kianga Yamada-Taylor, and it's published by Haymarket Books. For those of you who are online, it's actually freely available as a download, and thanks to the generosity of Haymarket Books, who I'm thanking right now, everybody here's getting a free copy on your way out. Okay, also, I mean, in addition to all the other free things, there's like bookshelves of free books. As you saw, this Books Unbanned, that incredibly beautiful display, Books Unbanned, and you may not have known, especially those of you later arriving, that actually all of those books are free to take. And that is courtesy of our friends at the African American Policy Forum, who did so much work to make that and this program happen. Thank you. At the end of the day, the very last thing we're going to do is hear a young person come up on stage and do a little performance for us. And that capstone presentation is thanks to a program that is close to my heart called Voices of a People's History of the United States. And I just want to thank them for making that happen here today. And of course, to all of my library colleagues at the Center for Educators in Schools, across NYPL, Queens Public Library, Brooklyn Public, all the people who are fighting against book bans, fighting to defend Black studies and for intellectual freedom. Please, let's just give them all a round of applause. Now, unfortunately, Kianga Yamada-Taylor had an unexpected family conflict at the last moment that prevented her from joining us here today. You still get her book. But unfortunately, she's not here. Fortunately, we are thrilled that we could still have a conversation right here in a few moments, followed by a Q&A. So get your questions ready. And also, by the way, we'll take questions from the live stream. So those of you following along at home, we'll save a few slots for you to pipe in as well. We're thrilled to have Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, part of the reason we had a late start is Professor Crenshaw was backstage furiously signing copies of her book. Now, this is the one book you have to buy, okay? We're giving you all the others, but you got to buy this one. And it's going to be in the Schomburg shop in just a few moments. We're whisking them over there as we speak. So during your breaks today, you can make your way over to the shop. If you're wondering, where's the shop in this place? It's right by where you signed in and got your swag bag and first registered. On that way, on the left-hand side as you entered the building. That's where the shop will be. And by purchasing her book at the shop, you're also supporting the Schomburg Center, so we hope you all stop there. This book is co-authored by Kimberly Crenshaw and the African American Policy Forum, with a foreword by Janelle Monáe. And the title is hashtag Say Her Name, Black Women's Stories of Police Violence and Public Silence. So please make sure you take advantage of the opportunity to get a signed copy today. So let me say a little bit about Kimberly Crenshaw. I could be here for hours trying to do a bio. I tried to shrink it down to something that would be audible. Kimberly Crenshaw is the co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum, the founder and executive director of the Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy Studies at Columbia Law School. She's an educator, like us. She's the Promise Institute professor at UCLA Law School and the Isidore and Seville Sulzbacher professor at Columbia Law School. Professor Crenshaw is popularly known for her development of the concepts of intersectionality and critical race theory, and of the Say Her Name campaign, and she's also the host of the podcast, Intersectionality Matters. And now, please join me in giving a warm Schomburg Center welcome to Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. How can I not? Look at this.
Okay, so I have some questions, and then we'll make sure we save time for your questions as well. So be thinking about what you want to ask. You are somebody who's so foundational. Am I a little echoey? You're somebody who's so foundational to the field of Black studies. In fact, Professor Crenshaw has a piece in that book that you're going to get at the end of the day today. Her piece, of course, is one of the ones that's excerpted. But what I wanted to know is, what's foundational for you? How did you get started? What were the teachers or the texts that got you going in this field?
Well, first of all, what an honor it is to be here at the Schomburg and with teachers. My mother was a teacher in Canton Public Schools for 50 years. Her mother was a teacher, so I come from a long line of teachers, and therefore I would have to start there.
Right.
I would have to start with my mother. I would have to start with a picture that always was hanging on our wall that includes all of the Black representatives to Congress during Reconstruction. So I grew up seeing history on our walls, history that I was not learning in the classroom. I considered my mother my griot. I was born and raised in the same town that she was born and raised in. And so as we would go around town, she would point out, that's the movie theater where an usher told me that I had to move upstairs. That is the swimming pool that I was in when I was 3 years old, and they drained the pool while I was splashing around. This is the high school that didn't let us get into the swimming pool until Fridays, right before they would clean it. So I grew up with a family that made our history relevant in the contemporary period. My friends used to tease me because I had to figure out what I was going to say at dinner, because during dinner, the kids had to say what they had learned in life during the day. So, you know, my friends would say, man, I never knew anyone who had to do homework for dinner. So it came from there, and then it was nurtured when I went to Cornell University. I took a double major in Africana Studies and government, and the person who was most foundational to my thinking was Dr. James T. Turner. Dr. Turner, oh my gosh, what are all the ways that he shaped my thinking? I think the most important thing I can say is that he made it clear that the status, the position, the material reality of people of African descent in this country and across the diaspora was not the product of anything internal inside of us. It was not anything that was a cultural deficit. He taught us about the political economy of race, white supremacy, enslavement. So when I graduated and went to law school, the questions that I had were shaped by the understanding that our position was socially constructed, and law played a significant role in that social construction. So my thinking about critical race theory, which is Africana studies as applied to law, is that this is just a continuity. It's a continuous expression of Black studies played out in the law in the same way that Black studies has a position and implications in sociology and political science and economics. Critical race theory is that space that Black studies has produced in the law.
Right. And you were grappling with the persistence of racism after the law had said it was illegal.
Precisely. I mean, and that is really what drove me to law school. I mean, initially I wanted to be, you know, like Thurgood Marshall. Oh my God. There it is, right? So yeah, I grew up, you know, a lot of black households have, you know, some of the basic pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King, you know, is one. Jesus is another one.
Yeah.
You know, my family had Martin Luther King, but it also had Thurgood Marshall. And so I grew up with an aspiration to learn whatever the incantations were that Thurgood Marshall learned and actually deployed in order to win Brown versus Board of Education and have that expand throughout the social terrain. So my aspiration, and plus they said I was talkative and argumentative. And, you know, so it's like, you must be, you know, set on being a lawyer. I can't really say that it was my idea or their idea, but, you know, it all came together.
Right. So it feels to me like we need critical race theory to understand the attack on critical race theory, but maybe we should back up and just unpack a little bit because it's so used and abused.
Yeah.
What are we even talking about here?
It is. So you guys get ready. I'm gonna do like an assessment to see if we have some of these crazy critical race theorists in the audience. So I'm just warning you, I'm coming to you in a minute. So as you said, the challenge of critical race theory, the challenge that critical race theory attempted to address is why there was so much inequality after, you know, the trumpets had sounded and, you know, the celebrations were over. I was that second generation. I watched the civil rights movement on television and thought, like many others, that, you know, soon all of the barriers would come down. We would, you know, have milk and honey throughout the land, and that was going to be far behind us. But by the time I got to law school, I enrolled the first year of the Reagan administration in which the actual infrastructures were actively being dismantled. The court that had been a friend was turning in the opposite direction. So I was actually in the institution training lawyers when the dismantlement of the law-based civil rights movement was actually happening. So you kind of have a seat right at the site of all of the activity. And that produced questions like, what role is law actually playing? We've been taught that it is the neutral referee, it is our advocate, but we were learning that, you know, law for the most part hasn't really been neutral with respect to African Americans since we got here.
Right.
It's been, you know, maybe a decade, if that, you know, actively trying to dismantle, some of which it facilitated and permitted, but now it was like reflexive. It was like snapping back to where it had been. So how do we explain this? How do we bring our sensibilities as racialized people into the study of law? What kind of questions do we ask that are somewhat different than the questions that had been asked all along? And of course, we have to remember one very important thing. These were elite institutions we were in. These were institutions that claimed to be at the top of the hierarchy when it came to legal thinking and theorization and practice. These were not the institutions that produced the legal revolution that was Brown versus Board of Education. These were not the institutions that were producing the thinkers that were helping us grapple with the most significant contradiction that lay at the heart of the actual republic. So we went into it with the sense that this institution is in a specific place, in a specific time, doing specific things, and that is not doing racial justice, right? So with that in mind, critical race theory was that expression of the students who were critical of the idea that race is just there, natural and biological. We knew that was obviously not the case. We were focusing on race. Others were focusing on many things, including critical legal studies that was focusing on class and how the law constructed class. We said absolutely, and law also constructs race. That was sort of like, how is that? Isn't race just there? And when we talked about theory, we were actually contrasting it to just the idea that you can understand race and law through taking a course on how to file a Title VII complaint, for example. That was critical practice. But we wanted to understand how law created race, not just how law was sort of post hoc trying to regulate what had been already created. So that was critical race theory. Now, you won't get that these days, right? You're not going to hear anything about how law is part of the structured dimension of racial inequality. You're not going to learn how housing segregation is one of the key drivers of wealth disparity. You're not going to hear how law helped facilitate that huge, huge disparity. You're not going to hear any of that when you hear about critical race theory. What you're going to hear is critical race theory is the product of people who hate America. And it's a product of people who really have it out for innocent white kids. And you're going to hear that critical race theory is a way of making people feel bad. You're not going to hear what critical race theory actually is. So I want to do this exercise to see who the real critical race theorists are, you know, in the audience, just so we can kind of level set what's going on with critical race theory. So if you are able to, please stand. If you can. And so I have this little checklist that I'm doing, you know, just to make sure that we know who the people we're talking about are. So I'm going to give you an option A and an option B in several vignettes. If you agree with option A, maybe it's good news. Don't worry, you're not critical race theorists. You can go ahead and sit down. If you think it's option B, then you keep standing and we'll see if you're a critical race theorist. So let's start with something near and dear to folks in New York. Let's say you hear or read a story about an Oscar-winning African-American actor who is arrested in a New York bodega for shoplifting a sandwich. Okay, if A, you read that and say, tis, 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 isn't it terrible how far the high and mighty have fallen that they are subject to stealing a sandwich to eat? Keep standing if you say, well, okay, here's another doing something while black phenomenon, right? Being a famous, wealthy black actor while black in a bodega. So again, if it's A, go ahead and sit down. You're definitely not a critical race theorist. If it's B, you might be. All right, let's try another one. You also read in the paper that a black couple gets their home appraised in a seller's market for $500,000 less than what they paid for it, even after they put $300 worth of improvements in it. You also read that the homeowners then go into their home, they take all the black art off the wall, all the pictures of their family, all the textiles out of their living room, they bring in their white friend to show the home, and suddenly, like magic, the home is appraised for $800,000 more. Sit down if you think it must have been a clerical error. Keep standing if you recognize that this is precisely the way that the housing market functions to deprive African Americans of the wealth, the primary source of wealth, which is in real estate. All right, if you're still here, I don't know about y'all. Might have to call DeSantis on your people. All right, let's try this one. You are one of very, very few black people in your place of work. You've come up with a great idea to do something better, to advance the interests of the project. You're in a meeting, you lay out this excellent idea, and suddenly your idea is met with crickets. 5 minutes later, Brad says basically the same thing. And it's like, there's a chorus Singing in heaven somewhere. This is precisely the idea that we've been looking for. Sit down if you think, well, probably you didn't articulate it that well. You weren't making your ideas clear enough. Keep standing if you recognize that this is a function of implicit bias. The very ways that Black intellectual production, brilliance is undermined and marginalized in workplaces everywhere. Okay, all right. I'm worried about you guys. All right, try this one. In the weeks after George Floyd is tragically murdered, you hear that Black parents are sitting down to give their kids the talk. Sit down if you're puzzled about why would they be talking about the birds and the bees in the middle of this moment. Keep standing if you know that this is precisely what Black parents everywhere have to do in order to increase the possibilities that their children will survive an encounter with police. All right, this is your last chance to free yourself from this critical race theory thing. You learned that less than 10% of the seniors in your school district can correctly identify the Civil War, slavery, as the cause of the Civil War. Sit down if you think that's a good thing, because slavery was not the cause of the Civil War. It was states' rights. Keep standing if you understand this is a problem of miseducation that has contributed to all of the distortion, the idea that the truth is indoctrination and indoctrination is the truth. All right, now I want you guys to look around for a moment, just so you can recognize each other, and you can go ahead and sit down, right?
Thank you.
So, you know, what do we learn from this? Critical race theory is critical thinking about how race not only has constructed our lives in the past, but how it continues to shape our experiences, and importantly, the legibility of these experiences. It's a prism for understanding the conditions that we are in, not simply to be able to read them, but to educate our way into the greater capacity to transform these conditions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So you just touched upon the way that critical race theory gives us language and lenses to look at and understand housing and law and bias in workplaces and a number of different arenas. But let's bring it up to the matter at hand that convenes us here today and use it, or I would ask you to try to help us use critical race theory to understand the book bans, the curriculum bans. How do you think about this landscape of what's sweeping the nation of banning Black studies and Black history?
Yeah. Well, there's nothing new under the sun, right? So let's just start there. Let's start by recognizing, as you were saying, how critical race theory helps us read our history into this moment. So we know that efforts to suppress literacy have always been one of the most significant features of white supremacy. We all know the history that rendered the capacity to read as being illegal. We also know that the punishment for teaching enslaved people to read was imprisonment and sometimes worse. And we also know that that is a continuous cycle. So after the end of slavery and during Reconstruction, one of the most significant things that the freedmen brought to the Republic was the notion of public schools. We also know that one of the first things after voting that Redeemers went after was public schools. We also know that the Daughters of the American Confederacy, not in the 19th century, but in the 20th century, went about a project of trying to re-narrate what the Civil War was about, re-narrate what enslavement was all about, and they were enormously successful to the extent that we still have lost cause history and ideology to this very day. A lot of people were finally upset about what was going on in Florida when the new social studies standards required the teaching that enslaved people receive skills during enslavement, right? What people were less aware of is this is part of lost cause education. This was part of the justification for enslavement. It wasn't all that bad. It's part of the justification for violence. Well, black people were violent too. These are not simply throwbacks, it's part of the continuity of the project of basically being able to write into history an ideological viewpoint on racism, on white supremacy, on enslavement, and on genocide as well. So when we come to this moment and we have a group called Moms for Liberty, which in many ways is the reincarnation of the Daughters, what they and others have been able to do is to rewrite the very small sense to which there has been historical correction, rewriting the ways in which history has been distorted. So it is not at all surprising that this playbook would present another page out of it. What is more surprising is how quickly it spread across the country. What is surprising is how many of our institutions, moderate centrist institutions, have helped to facilitate it, including the media, including, we'll get to this in a minute, the College Board. But first, I just want to give people a sense of how widespread this is. In 47 states, there has been some effort to suppress what students can learn about our history, along the lines that these are divisive ideas, along the lines that they're designed to make children feel bad, along the lines that this is un-American. And unless you think that it's just a red state phenomenon, we need to realize that it is also a blue state phenomena as well. So California, shockingly, has more local level efforts to suppress the true and inclusive history of the United States than Texas. Why? Well, because Texas did it by state law. In California, it's happening in school districts. It's happening in suburban school districts. And yes, there are some places where it's happening in New York as well. More than 22 million students go to school where there's a ban, nearly half. So we're talking about not just a far right-wing problem. We're talking about how extraordinarily conservative, neo-nationalist set of ideologies has moved from the fringes to the center of American politics, to the center of public education, to the center of the classrooms in which our teachers teach. So we cannot overestimate how significant this challenge is. And here's the important thing, it's not just a political strategy for the next election. They're playing for the century in the same way that the Daughters of the Confederacy played for the century, and one can say they won. When Toni Morrison, one of the most decorated authors of the 20th century, is the author of the second most banned book, The Bluest Eye, we know we're living in the third Reconstruction. We're living in a Redeemer society in which people want their narrative back, and they're taking it back through censorship.
Wow, wow. You so powerfully weaving a story that goes back to that Reconstruction moment where the question of democracy and voting and political rights and civil rights go hand in hand with narratives and education and what young people learn and are exposed to. How do you see the stakes of this battle in the 21st century over book banning? What's the political connection? I mean, you've written about voter suppression in connection with this. You want to say more about the stakes?
Well, we were honored, AAPF, we were honored to go on an unbanned book tour in 2022, along with the Transformative Justice Coalition. And the Transformative Justice Coalition, headed up by Barbara Arnwine, has been raising attention to vote suppression since 2007, 2008, 2009, when vote suppression was the reaction to the election of Barack Obama. Right. On the heels of the suppression of the vote is the suppression of the voice. Suppressing political power and suppressing narrative and historical power have always gone hand in hand. As I mentioned earlier, that's exactly what happened during Reconstruction. You go after the vote, you go after the schools, you go after our ability to express ourselves politically, you go after the ability to tell our narrative. That's exactly what is happening now. So most of the states that have attempted to suppress the right to vote have also suppressed the right to learn. Most of the actors who are behind book bans are also behind the effort to just ban certain members of the political electorate, to push us out of active contestation about what this democracy is really about. We all recognize how closely related exercising the franchise is to being educated about how our society works, about what civics is all about. The idea is to push back on all of those. And look, it's not a secret agenda. This is what is so frustrating about it. They've said what they're about. They have been clear about what they are about. The only people who seem to be unclear about it, dare I say, is the media, are the media. They're the ones that are saying, oh, critical race theory, controversy, should it be taught in schools? Rather than there are anti-democratic forces who have said we're going after public education and we're going after it by distorting what's going on in public education. We're taking critical race theory and we're going to turn it into something that will make people think, oh, that's crazy stuff. That can't be going on in our schools. And they've used that to attack everything. So they've used it against Black history, they've used it against queer studies, they've used it against intersectionality, feminism, and now against any book that actually includes these ideas. So here's the thing, when something starts and it looks like, oh, they're only going after those few people, so I'm okay with censorship, right? Once you let that horse out of the barn, you can't get it back unless you create a massive effort to say, I'm not going to let you censor us out of our own narrative. I'm not going to let our democracy fall apart over censorship. So we always have to remember the intersections between censorship and disenfranchisement. This is what our country has been through in the past. This is what the attempt is right now.
Amazing, thank you. I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about your new book about Black women's experience with police violence. And it occurs to me that there's a common thread here in the matter of silencing, that the title says, public silence, that there's a silence that's being broken, there's stories that aren't being told that you're trying to tell. So can you just take us through this work, the Say Her Name campaign, and why it's so important to break this silence?
Yeah. And let me answer that and also use it as a way of talking about the silencing that's happening at the college board level. So what you're seeing here is what happened to the framework out of which this book has been written, right? Black feminism intersectionality, institutional racism, structural racism, systemic marginalization, Black queer studies and theories. These are all ideas that were initially part of the Black Studies curriculum that Ron DeSantis essentially said, this will not be taught in Florida. It violates our Stop Woke Act. So they produced a chart, just to make it clear, you know, to the College Board. These are the ideas that we will not approve.
Wow.
And unless you're like sort of unclear about this, these are the authors that we're not going to allow to be taught in the state of Florida. Many of those authors, as you said earlier, are in Our History Has Always Been Contraband. So they made it clear that these are critical ideas that connect the dots for students. It creates the grammar to help them understand how the facts come together to tell a story about what has happened and what the contemporary consequences of those things happening happen to be. When the College Board released its next iteration of the course, none of these authors were part of the requirement. Some of them disappeared altogether. Wow. Some of them were in the optional stuff. Can you imagine bell hooks being disappeared from Black Studies? Can you imagine Audre Lorde being disappeared from Black Studies? Can you imagine Black Lives Matter being disappeared from Black Studies? So this was appeasement. Mm-hmm. Whatever reason you say it is, even the appearance of appeasement in the face of censorship is inconsistent with ideas of broad democratic inclusion. Right. So this book does precisely some of the things that the objectives of the Black Studies curriculum have been edited out. There's a slide here, I hope you can pull it up, that shows what the initial objectives were. They were, for example, to equip students with an understanding of how race intersects with gender and class and other aspects of experience. It was designed to equip students with the information to make better arguments about how to move from this world to a more equitable one. It is one that asks students to understand the implications, past, present, and future, of the conditions that are historically just there. So imagine what it means to take these learning objectives out of Black Studies. What are you conceding when you take the idea that we want to imagine how these ideas might help us create a better and different future? You're basically telling our students to be happy with things the way they are. Right. It just is. There's nothing that we are called to do once we understand our history in the appropriate context. So Say Her Name. Right. Is an effort. We didn't know it was contesting this because we thought most people who were invested in Black Studies were invested in it for the same reasons that we were. But this is an effort to actually speak to why there is silence about state violence against Black women. What have the frames been that told a partial story about how anti-Black racism impacts Black bodies, but there's a broader story about this historically and a broader story about it in the here and now. It talks about the consequences of having a framework of anti-Black police brutality that's gendered in one way and not gendered in all of the ways that this brutality actually happens. And importantly, it talks about the consequences to families of Black women who have suffered the unimaginable. What does it mean when one has lost a mother to police violence and one goes to a march and no name of a woman who's killed by police is known? Why are these names not known? And what do we need to do in order to raise our own awareness to create the prisms that are necessary to actually see these women. If you look at the cover of the book and our t-shirts, you see that this is a word picture. It's a word picture made up of names of black women who've been killed by the police. It's an artistic rendering of the work that we have to do to make it legible. We have to look for them because the existing frameworks aren't just going to deliver them. The media ain't going to present it. Our stories and our narratives don't elevate it. So it just means to be literate. We have to look inside and we have to find them, encircle them with bearing witness, with the love that we extend to all of our siblings, our men, our boys, our women, our girls, our non-binary bodies. All of these have to be part of the movement against anti-Black state violence.
So it's almost time for questions. So what I'm going to invite you to do now, I'm going to ask one more question, but while I do, we have 2 microphones in the back. We'll probably only have time for a few questions. We'll get in as many as we can. I would ask if you want to ask a question, line up at the microphone, try to keep it pithy so that we can get to as many of your colleagues as possible. And we'll also make some space for my colleague who's here somewhere to read out some, who has a microphone to read out some coming to us from the live stream as well. So, you know, this is an audience of teachers. And teachers are, just like librarians, are a category of people who are under attack, who are facing censorship, who sometimes, you know, try to do this work in hostile conditions. Do you have thoughts about, you know, kind of takeaway thought about your hope for what teachers take away from a day like today, what your hope for what teachers can do, and in their position as teachers and just as people in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a reason why public education has been identified as the front line in the war on woke. Public education, the classrooms, they are the laboratories of democracy. They are the places where the deepest values that hold us together as a society are actually taught. They're not just, you know, there to teach people the alphabet. That's not what education is. They're also not there to teach the opposite of critical thinking, right? That is the whole point of education, and it's also why the beginning of the modern civil rights movement focused, you know, on the classroom. We understand that. So I think the first thing is just recognizing how absolutely essential, how absolutely vital the work that teachers do actually is to recovering a democracy that's on the brink. I am not sure what is going to happen with our democracy. I am not sure what is going to happen, what we're going to be sitting in 2025 and in 2030. I am sure that if teachers are taken out of the pro-democracy equation, I'm pretty sure what our society looks like. So I see the work that teachers do, the work that we do with teachers, the support that we try to provide for teachers in dispelling some of the myths, the stereotypes, providing connections with other teachers in other states, just providing a space for teachers to talk about their challenges as some of the most important work that we do. You hold the key to the next generation. You are the ones that'll help our students understand both the history that they've inherited and the futures that they are ultimately going to create. I've often said that, you know, we were passed the baton at a particular point in the race. I don't want to be responsible for dropping that baton or giving it to the next generation a length behind where we received it.
Right.
So it means that the way we have to run this race, suddenly now, you know, we're running a hurdle race, right? It's not just a clean race around. We're jumping over hurdles, and we have to learn those hurdles, how to do it together in order to be able to pass on to the next generation the tools that they are going to need to survive.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe we can get two together.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Good morning.
There's water if you need.
I don't have a question, I just have a statement. That's why I wanted to get up here first and get it out there. I am a retired New York City Department of Education high school librarian. I am now a reference librarian at a New York City college. My statement is this. My population are adults. They are not the 18 to 21s just coming out of high school. I tell my students when I do my research class that we are always have been griots. We must tell our stories to our children. We must take them to the library. We must take them to the museums, because what they are doing now is telling us that we cannot read. This is just like in the 1800s when we were enslaved. And if we, as parents, grandparents, extended family members, do not take our children by the hand and take them to the library, buy the books, and teach us our history, we will be lost.
Thank you. Go ahead. Okay, we'll go over here next. Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning, Dr. Crenshaw. I'm a New York City public school teacher. I've been reading your work since high school, for high school debate. And the question I want to ask is, how do we as teachers help to empower our parents in helping us fight book bans and fight this idea that our history is not American history?
Thank you, thank you. Maybe I'll take two and answer them together. So,
go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Tatum Hall. I'm currently a junior in high school.
Hey, welcome.
In my experience, I've had teachers who did have, for lack of a better word, argument for my speaking on the lack thereof in literature about my history and about my people, and learning more about how I can advance as a Black woman in our world. And I think my question is just, how can I as a student incorporate these readings, you know, while it may not be able to be incorporated in my school, how can I still bring...
Thank you for both of these questions. And I caveat before I say anything, I am not the expert, right? I'm not a public school teacher, and it's been a long time since I was a junior. And love that you're here. I have some thoughts about these, but you know, I really want to hear from you all as well. You are the practitioners, you are in the trenches. What is working, and what do you recommend to your students? I'll say, with respect to the parents, one of the things that we wanted to do on the Unbanned Book Tour was to make concrete to parents what this censorship is all about, because they're not going to really get it from the mainstream media. You're not going to pick up the New York Times and really find out why Toni Morrison is being banned, or why Ta-Nehisi Coates is being banned. And you're not going to know that some of the stuff that you grew up with, some of the favorite books that you read are being banned. So we decided to collect 19 books and go to 17 states and give these books away, so parents can actually understand and see this is about erasing aspects of your life, right? This is not about some abstract theory. This isn't about something that you can't touch and put your hands around. This is about your story, your grandparents' story, our collective story. This is what they don't want you to pass on to your children. So making it concrete, I think, is is one of the most important things we do, or the exercise that we just did here today. The reason we do that is so, again, people can say, wait a minute, they're trying to reach into my brain and take things out of it, right? They're trying to censor the way I experience the world. That cannot be acceptable. So that's just our how we go about doing it. I suspect that there are many other ways of bringing parents in. I would also offer that in some of the cases, there have been cases with parents and school children challenging efforts to take out certain aspects in the curriculum. It was Chicano studies that was taken out of the curriculum in Arizona, and the data showed that students who actually went through the Chicano studies program had far better outcomes in terms of their grades, in terms of matriculation to college, in terms of their well-being. This was unrefutable. So what does it mean to still go after those courses? It means they don't care about the well-being of our children.
Right.
It's not about educational achievement. It's about we're uncomfortable with an empowered population of children who've learned the truth about their history. We don't care about whether this makes them better students. What we care about is it makes us feel more comfortable. Making that clear to our parents. If you care about your children, you have to care about what they learn. And so to come back to you, one of the things that we are really hoping to continue to contribute to is the tradition of Saturday schools. Is the tradition. I mean, you know, this has been part of our achievement for as long as we've been here, and perhaps we haven't curated these opportunities as much as we should have, believing that now schools are integrated and now, you know, we have our teachers there. Yes, they're relatively so, and yes, we have teachers, but now the teachers are being constrained and you don't get access to the teaching and the literature you need. So I think these opportunities for young people to organize, to create connections with willing teachers, retired teachers, law professors who would love to have more interaction with young people, these are the possibilities that we want to explore. We have a Freedom to Learn network that we encourage you to sign up for, and we meet monthly, once a month, as an effort to try to crowdsource the capacity to continue teaching, notwithstanding the censorship that everybody is concerned about.
Thank you. Let's take one from the live stream and then one over here. Go ahead.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'm representing everyone on the live stream. One word that has been used about 5 times in the chat is counteraction. People are looking for specific ways that they can counter what you've been speaking about. Some of the specifics, people have been asking about, they're an educator at an HBCU. We have some people who are in California and Florida. We have some people who are looking for counteraction in school leadership. So we have some disparate, or seemingly disparate cases, but all with this theme of counteraction. So I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And over here.
Thank you, Dr. Crenshaw. I think you, all right, this is good. I think you partly answered this with your thoughts on like Saturday classes, so I'm just asking for some additional insight. Something I struggle with as an educator is like balancing that fight against book banning and just like that whole milieu with like the kind of healthy cynicism, anti-institutionalism that like marks Black history. I know you spoke about your experience not learning about your history in their schools. I identify with that. That kind of lit a fire in me. And I think like there's utility in that righteous anger. So like, how do we balance that? Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for these questions. And again, I'm keen to hear collective ideas, like let's crowdsource some of these potential possibilities. There's a slide that we had up earlier, so if folks can pull it up, it's the 5 for 5. Here's one of the things that we observed when we began Freedom to Learn in response to the College Board censoring Black studies. We wrote a petition basically calling for the restoration of all of the purged material, denouncing the heckler's veto, namely their justification was we took this stuff out, we took intersectionality in particular out because it'd been so distorted and so turned inside out it was no longer a useful concept. And we wanted to say, who gets to decide what is no longer a useful concept, right? How is it that you allow a concerted effort on the part of folks who say that they're out to destroy public education to determine what's no longer legitimate? So we put that letter out. We now have 7,000 people who signed it. But one of the things as they were signing it that many people said was, where's the movement? Where is everybody? How can I get connected with other people who are similarly outraged about what's happening or asking for ways to respond? There's no one and no place that we can turn to. And these people were all over the country, right? Red states, blue states, suburbs, urban areas. And so what we decided was necessary is, number one, people need to have a gathering place. I remember when I watched Eyes on the Prize and they were talking about the Montgomery bus boycott. How was it that those people were able to walk for over a year? What was it that gave them the energy and the connection and even the spiritual motivation to keep coming together? They came together at night, where they heard about the righteousness of their struggle. They heard testimony. They were able to talk about the tactics and the strategy and where they were in the struggle. We're like, we don't have that right now.
Right.
And we need to create that space for that. So the one thing that we can say that we can get back from the fact that, you know, the internet has been, you know, such an opponent right now because it helps spread disinformation, we need to use it to bring together our disparate members all over the country who are really struggling and those who have ideas. So that's why we do homeroom once a month, where we welcome people from all over the country who want to understand what's happening better, want to testify about what's happening, want to say the thing that they might not be able to say in their classroom, and want skills and various other ideas for activating their students and their parents. It's not everything that we need, but it is the beginning. All struggles start with a collective recognition that we're in this together, right? And a place to go where you can be with other people who are in it. So I want to invite people, you know, to either come to homeroom or create your own homerooms so you're better able to do that. And my hope is out of that, people who want to, you know, create Saturday schools, whether they're virtual or in place, can connect with each other and share materials and ideas. People who want to help parents go to the school boards and testify. Collectivize that struggle. The most important thing, though, that I want to leave you with is your various organizations and elected officials need to hear from you. Because trust assured, they are hearing from parents who don't want these stories and this education to be taught. They are hearing from them, and they are seeing them going to school boards en masse. So we cannot not do that, right? Our elected officials need to hear that you do not support the ban on anything, right? Not trying to pivot away from Black studies, wokeness, critical race theory. You need to be able to mobilize people so our elected officials hear from you, those who are in the organizations that claim, to represent us. I'm talking about the blue chip organizations, the venerable organizations, the new grassroots organizations. They need to hear from the NAACP and Black Lives Matter. NAACP needs to get in it, Urban League needs to get in it, and they will get in it if they hear from you. So we've got to treat this like we've treated any other struggle that we've been in the past. It needs to be collectivized, it needs to be loud, it needs to be vocal, and it needs to be smart.
Thank you. I know my Schomburg Center colleagues are sitting here thinking, when is he going to mention that we have a Saturday program?
Yeah.
There is an amazing program called the Schomburg Center Junior Scholars, and it is Saturdays here for ages 11 to 18, all school year. I believe the enrollment is already done for this school year, so you got to wait till next fall to enroll your 11 to 18-year-old, but it is a historical literacy, cultural program, and multimedia production program, and it's amazing. I think it's in its 16th or 17th year. Very important. So I think we have time for 2 more, and then that'll be it. So you and you, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Yesenia Escobar. I'm sorry I'm sneaking here because I'm coming from Philadelphia. I woke up at 4 a.m. to be here.
Wow.
Yeah, and I came to the United States to study a PhD in Spanish. I'm teaching Spanish there. And one of my questions is about, this importance of Afro-Latinos also in the study of Black studies, because in my case, for instance, that I am in the Spanish department, we don't find too much about us because as Afro-Latinos, we have been erased of Hispanic history.
Yeah.
And also when we enter in connection with Black or African-American studies, we don't find our contribution to this country too, because there are a lot of Afro-Latino people here in this country too. So I mean, how can we talk, have a conversation in order to connect our history with your history, because we have many similarities, and also how can we feed our own history from your contributions, to the critical race theories. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last question, go ahead.
Grand Rising family, thumbs up, you can hear me, teachers, you know how that goes. Queen Kimberly Crenshaw, first I'd just like to say thank you. You have had such a huge impact on my scholarship as a Black woman and as a Black mother. I am a special education teacher as well as a researcher. And my question to you, Queen, and you might not be able to answer it today, or if someone else can answer it, I'm all open for it. I had a Black father come and say to me, I was teaching about Black feminism, and he said, Miss Briscoe, feminism destroyed the Black family, can't you see? Yes, child, he did it, honey. I had to pray to the ancestors, honey. But I say that to say because I'm so passionate about my history and my ancestors from the lens of spirituality and just from everything. My question to you, Queen, is how do I ignite that sense of urgency in my Black man? So I say that because, yes, give it up for my Black brothers. I love everybody, but yes. I say that because we are Black history. This is Black history happening. I create Black history in my womb, in my sister's room, and every woman in this room. So the man that has fallen in love with me and knows that I'm passionate about critical race theory, how do I ignite that flame in him? Because he's so caught up in his own intersectionality of being a Black man in America. And I know what happened to my ancestors, but I gotta pay the bills and I gotta make sure you happy and I gotta protect you because I don't know if I'm coming home at night. I'm like, but babe, we have to teach our prince about his history. Stokely Carmichael is not on the wall because it's decor, or because it's cool, it's because it's history. So how do I ignite that sense of urgency in my Black brother who's standing on the corner who doesn't realize society's trying to erase you, baby? And I'm not just saying that because I'm a sexy nerd. I'm saying it because you may not have a fingerprint in society in 100 plus years. So that is my question. How do I ignite it within my inner center communities and my Black community? Oh, and I have a gift for you. I don't know if they're gonna allow me to give it to you. If I gotta mail it to you, I will, but I have something for you, Queen. But thank you, family. Everybody have a prosperous rest of your day.
Yes, thank you. Well, yeah, leave it to the last two questions to be the ones that we could talk for the rest of the afternoon. Let me say that it is a historical theme that African American women have been that political constituency that has been most concerning, let's say, to those who want to protect the status quo. In fact, even back in the 19th century, when the struggle was over whether women would get the right to vote, a lot of white supremacists were like, if it was just about our women, it would be okay, but if you give those Black women the right to vote, we will not be able to keep those people down.
Right.
The idea around activism and the way that these structures are actually playing out, like materially, has been something that we've seen Black women being activated by over the course of history. And we see it even now. Black political participation is significantly more gendered as women than as men, which is not to say that Black men are not actively participating. It's just that Black women are more so. And I would say that in this moment around censorship, when we were going from state to state, yeah, we would obviously see more moms coming out. We would see more women coming out. And I do think that you're right to point out that for many of our brothers, there is a sense that I got to deal with the material stuff. This over here it's perhaps I don't have time for that, or it's the luxury. Let me get this straight first. And I think when I think about the men who are part of this and who we work with, they are fully aware that our material well-being is being determined by these things. They are aware not only that the attack on racial justice, on wokeness, but also the attack on Black women is actually undermining our overall well-being. And when I get to the end and I still haven't been as successful as I want to in a conversation, I go back to, and this is why this is probably the worst thing to say at the end, I go back to the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill moment. And I talk about, so you're unhappy with the way elections are coming out. You're unhappy with the fact that affirmative action has been struck down. You're unhappy about the fact that we don't have, a robust Voting Rights Act anymore. Do you know the fifth vote that made all those things possible basically came from someone that looks like us? And one of the reasons that he was on the court was because we don't know our history. We don't know that sexual harassment actually came from Black women. We don't know that Rosa Parks actually got her start as an activist defending a Black woman who was gang raped. We don't understand how anti-Black racism has been experienced by Black women, and that has created the literacy and the laws that we are looking at playing out in this place. Here's what people don't know. When Clarence Thomas was confirmed, more than 75% of the Black community supported it after Anita Hill came forward, because they saw Anita Hill as doing something that was anti-Black, rather than Anita Hill walking in the history of Black women everywhere who've recognized that sexual harassment, sexual abuse has been a work condition since we arrived on these shores. So the point is, if you can see the consequences of that lack of literacy, if you can see what happens when we are not in solidarity with one another, when you see the deterioration of our democracy and don't see that opportunity to take it in a different direction was missed because of our relative ignorance about the full scope of what anti-Black racism looks like. If you don't see that, we're not going to be able to correct the situation that we're in now. And for the most part, that conversation actually gets us to another place. The last thing I'll offer as a resource, there was, AAPF has a series called Under the Black Light. And one of our black lights during the election, the presidential election, featured all African American men talking about politics, talking about why there is now more daylight between Black men and Black women in terms of voting, why the ex-president may have more support in the Black community now than ever before. It's really an enlightening black light, so I encourage you to take a look at it. And also now with respect to Afro-Latinas, absolutely it is true that intersectionality is a conceptual tool that helps us understand the various ways that gender intersects with the African diasporic experience. Critical race theorists have addressed some aspects of how anti-Blackness is experienced within Latina communities. And we're not talking about an anti-Blackness that only is experienced here in the United States, but throughout the Latin diaspora. I recommend Tanya Hernandez, who is an amazing Afro-Latina who keeps everyone on their toes about the need to have a broadened intersectional and critical perspective. There's also efforts to talk about critical race studies throughout the global diaspora, along with third world analysis of colonialism and systemic discrimination. So I simply want to say that there are materials, there are projects. We can't assume that they're not because they might not rise to the top of the media. We have to recognize that there is a broad literature, but here is the one thing I do want to say that's important. There was not critical race theory until there were people of color who were admitted to law schools in mass numbers during the late 70s and 80s. As there was no feminism before, no academic feminism without large numbers of women, no queer theory without queer people. Theories come out of our presence in these institutions. So when we see gaps and absences, these are a product of the need to have far more emphasis on making sure that these institutions are accessible, which brings me to the last point. There's an attack on affirmative action, diversity, equity, and inclusion across the country. We've got to fight that with everything that we have because we haven't come close to parity in these institutions. And if we're now going to start losing, we're going to see less of the work we need rather than more of it.
Wow, thank you. Before we give Professor Crenshaw one last raucous round of applause for all these amazing thoughts and ideas and inspiration, I just want to give a little stage directions. We're going now to a break during which you can purchase books, grab more books for free, and get to your next workshop, which is listed on your program. Those of you who registered for the curriculum workshop is going to be in the American Negro Theater. As you exit, you turn right and go down the stairs for the American Negro Theater. Everybody else will be sharing that resource and some others right here back in the auditorium at 10:45. Please join me in thanking Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. That was amazing. Thank you.
Okay.
show. I will be your host, Oprah Shantae Winfrey. So please get comfortable. You see, I'm very cozy. And this section right here will be covering curriculum. So let me introduce our guest or panelist. I don't know. This is my first time doing this. Alex and Brian, do you want to say your full name and position?
My name is Alex Trenelone. I am the manager for curriculum development here in the Center for Educators in Schools.
And you've already met me. I'm Brian Jones, director of the Center for Educators in Schools.
Thank you. So our very first question around curriculum, what are different curricular products available and what do they do?
Yes. Okay. So, before we even do, there we go. So I want to say a little preface to this, which is that, the library, of course, has amazing resources. After we talk, you're going to hear about programs where you can get books for your classroom. You're going to hear about how you can use exhibitions here at the library, at the Schomburg Center and the broader New York Public Library. So when we say curriculum, we actually mean something pretty specific. We mean helping you use the archives of the New York Public Library. That means we're helping you teach with primary sources, many of which you've probably never seen before because they've been sitting in dusty boxes. So we're a library. We're not competing with McGraw-Hill. We're not competing with Scholastic. We're not competing with any new curriculum that the DOE is rolling out or any curriculum product anywhere in the country or here in New York. We are creating unique resources for expanding on any existing curriculum, deepening your teaching by using the unique and amazing primary sources from the New York Public Library. So here, let me click. So that's what we mean by curriculum. And let me just say another thing for everybody here and those following along online. Sometimes the best way to navigate the New York Public Library is Google online. So you could Google teaching with NYPL primary sources, and we have a website where we've started to gather these resources. So there's just a first few that we've put out, and there's so much more that's on the way. And all of these are about teaching with primary sources. And they come in different configurations, but I'll show you some of what we've got going on. So Alex actually wrote a really cute set of lessons. Sorry, cute's not the right word, but impactful, powerful, compelling set of lessons. There's this Afro-Cuban artist named Romulo Laschetiniere who did this like 1950s street photography here in New York City, and it's like amazing photos like this. So we're not. The Schomburg, his collection is here at the Schomburg Center. Now, by the way, the Schomburg Center has 500,000 photographs. So we know that none of you have time to go dig through 500,000 photographs. What we're trying to do is meet you halfway. Alex and his team are digging through those photographs, trying to find a set of them. Here are 3, that you might want to teach with. And then, of course, we're always, because we're a library, we're inviting you to come back, you and your students, and look at more. But we're trying to curate for you some that we think you could use in your classroom. So Alex has a great lesson about teaching the concept of community, using these photographs as like a portal into communities that might be familiar to you. And you can find that on Teaching with NYPL Primary Sources. Let me go a little faster. There's a lesson with just 2 photographs in it that's about the violence of the so-called Indian boarding schools you might know about. A very powerful lesson. There's some material about, we used a conversation that we had with the author and scholar Matthew Delmont, has a new book out about the role of African Americans in the Second World War, and then we kind of lay out a bunch of teaching ideas and library resources related to that topic. Then we're starting to do something new, and we're kind of like a startup almost inside the larger New York Public Library, And so one of the new things we're trying to do is, we took out the, okay.
Kathleen's going to talk about that.
Never mind. Well, I was going to say we're doing things in connection to exhibitions and making special guides for teachers to use exhibitions, but that's coming in the next conversation of the Shantae Oprah show. But here is we have another set that are about how playgrounds and how children's play shaped the architectural landscape of New York City over time. A really delightful set of lessons.
That photo is titled, "Kick the Can for Which Many Children Are Arrested."
You're right.
So now, Alex, what are the components of these kinds of resources?
Well, thank you, Shantae. I'd be happy to talk about that. Our philosophy, so when we think about curriculum development at the Center for Educators and Schools, we're really thinking about educators in the broadest sense of the word. So to borrow a phrase from logistics, we want to provide you with basically everything but the last mile of curriculum delivery. There's no way that we could design things to fit the variety of students and classrooms, and as a former classroom teacher, I know so much of it is thinking about how you're just going to get from one day to the next. And so to do that, what we do when we provide the curriculum is basically a suite of things to help you bring it to your classroom. So that includes, of course, the primary sources, making those really easy and surfacing them for you to find. And so if you like nothing else that we did, at least you have the primary sources. But then we're also modeling inquiry paths and providing some suggested answers to help you scaffold your students' understanding through just a primary observational analysis to integrating it into a larger research question. To support educators to really analyze a primary source, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, we're providing the historical context within which an image or item was created to help you share that with your students, and those essays are also kind of written with if you're teaching students who are in upper grades, that's also an essay that they might be able to read. And finally, I'm a special education teacher by trade. One of our curriculum educators is also, were there special educators in the room? Yes, hallelujah. Really thinking about accessibility. What do we need to make these items and this teaching accessible? And so one of the things that we've heard from educators is multilingual access. And so we have the primary sources that are included in our largest curriculum guide to make public our joy, which Brian is going to talk about just recently. Next, translated into Arabic, Chinese, and Spanish. And then our PDF is also fully accessible for screen readers. So really thinking about how do we get into it, providing you with everything you need to sit down and think, how much time do I have? Who's sitting in front of me? How am I going to bring this content? Which pieces of this content do I want to bring my students through?
So you already hinted at it, to make public our joy, the new emancipation curriculum. Brian, tell us all about it.
Okay, so when Juneteenth became a national holiday, we knew everybody's going to teach it, right? But when you dig into the history, it's a Texas story in many ways. So we were wondering, well, what's the New York version? What went down in New York? And we hit upon 3 key moments in the struggle for emancipation in New York's history. The abolition of the international trade in human beings in 1808, the abolition of slavery in New York State in 1827, and then, of course, the national emancipation in 1865. And in each of those historical moments, what we're bringing you here are the voices of Black New Yorkers reacting to the moment. So I don't know what else you've got going on in your literature you're teaching, what textbooks you're using, but we've got amazing primary sources that you can fly into that teaching to help your students hear the voices of Black New Yorkers in those moments. And as a nice treat to end our day, that student performance that you're going to hear at the very end of this day is a student performing one of those sources from this curriculum for us. So, as you might imagine, like we often feel today, like many people felt about Juneteenth becoming a national holiday, people had mixed feelings. about each one of these. And they debated, should we go out in the streets? Sometimes that's dangerous to go out in the streets. And if we do go out in the streets, how do we go out in the streets? And also, each of these victories is like incomplete. There's still so much yet to be done. So yeah, we're making public our joy, but we're also like not where we want to be. And so how do we both speak our truth about that work that needs to be done and celebrate what we've accomplished in this moment? And that kind of, those mixed feelings about commemorating each of those occasions is some of what you hear in the voices of Black New Yorkers.
Can we get a closer look of one of the sources?
Yeah. So actually, in the American Negro Theater, at the end of the day, this item is actually part of the Schomburg Photos and Prints collection, and it is on display downstairs, so you can see the actual item. And, you know, just take a moment with it. Look all through. This item is called Freedom to the Slave. It features a Union artillery officer standing atop a Confederate flag, which is being ripped, a church, a man reading a newspaper. And the curriculum is organized around a research question. How did Black New Yorkers commemorate emancipation?